Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Today on the show, we have James Zolman. James is the founder at gruntworkers.com. He's launched several businesses and had a successful exit. He's failed a ton, and he's grown 2 businesses over the $10 million mark. Between his own businesses and consulting for others, he has been responsible for well over $250 million in small business revenue and several high 6 and low 7-figure launches. James now helps business owners stay focused on strategy and growth by helping them out getting them out of the technician trap and outsourcing the quote unquote grunt work. His personal mission is to do the best to live a family now lifestyle where work interrupts family and not the other way around. His mission for Grunt Workers is twofold. The first is to help marketing leaders launch more strategic and profitable campaigns than ever before. And the second is to support the career growth of brilliant marketers in the Philippines. Well, James, thank you so much for being on, man.
It's good to be here, Raul. Thanks for having me.
James, so for a lot of the founders and entrepreneurs that I speak with, we get to choose a lifestyle, but I know that the lifestyle that we choose is not a repercussion, but an outcome of the experiences that we've had in the past in different ventures, business growth, downfalls, really good successes. But before we talk about your family now lifestyle and what that is and how you're living it, what got you here? What were some of the experiences you had early on in your career with business to get to where you are right now?
That's a great question. I feel like the history is really big. I've been fortunate to be able to do a lot, and in doing a lot, I've failed a lot. So I always joke with my wife that I've failed 999 times and I've succeeded once, and that's out of every 1,000 attempts. That's just what it feels like at times, especially as an entrepreneur. So I guess. Would you like me to start at the very beginning when I was just starting out?
Yeah, I'd love to know, because one of the things that are important is knowing the backstory behind the current decisions.
Yep. Yeah. So backstory behind current decisions, man. I'll try to condense it down into maybe 5 minutes or so. But I first got married and I needed a way to support my family. So I was looking around and I found a bunch of different certifications that I could get because I wasn't really keen on getting a formal education. I ended up getting a formal education, but at the time I wasn't really keen on that. So I was looking at ways to shortcut the system. How can I get to money and have a certification to sort of differentiate myself? So I found insurance, investments, real estate, and home inspections, just a few random niches that I researched, and I was about to pull the trigger on real estate for about $2,500. This was a little over 16 years ago, and Google Ads came out with a certification for $50. I was like, I'm newly married, I'm really poor. $50 sounds a heck of a lot better. I have no clue about online, no clue about. I've had a little bit of sales experience before that. I liked marketing, I liked management. So I was like, okay.
What year was it?
This was 2004.
2004.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the beginnings of the digital.
Yeah. So Google Ads was maybe a year or two old at that point.
Yeah.
They weren't very old at all. That they followed the flavor of what Yahoo sort of pioneered as pay-per-click advertising. Google came in and sort of redefined the whole niche, right? Just because they're absolutely brilliant and just took it so much further.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, Google, it was called AdWords at the time. So Google AdWords had this $50 certification. So I went and did it. And then within a couple of weeks, I picked up my first client, a realtor out of a super small town in Idaho, just down the road from where I live. He took a chance on me, and I only charged him $100 a month.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, okay, if I can get a bunch of these $100 a month, I can do this. I can do good. And I quickly figured out that $100 a month is nothing compared to the work that actually has to happen. So I started charging more and more and more. And within that first year, I ended up, as an agency, I ended up at about $500,000 annual recurring revenue. So I knew I was onto something. And we were producing good results for our clients. So a few years later, I scaled that many times, and I got into affiliate marketing, which is basically commission-based sales online. Instead of running your own agency and doing all the work for others, you kind of run your own marketing campaigns and get a percentage performance-based fee, which is actually where I went with the agency after charging flat fees for the first year or so. Because performance-based, you can almost always earn more when it's performance-based because you're motivated to do more, motivated to do better. But that lends itself to working extremely long hours. So as an affiliate marketer, I was maybe putting in 12 to 16-hour days. My wife and I, we had a kid a couple of years into our marriage, and then we had another one 4 years in, for 4 or 5 years in. So we had 2 kids. I'm being this affiliate marketer. Fortunately, one of my buddies, he started a financial website and invited me in to be a profit share partner on that. And we were able to scale that in the payday and personal loan space. And he was able to sell that company. So that was sort of my first good sales experience as far as selling a company goes, because I was on the inside. I was on the profit share side, which is all the upside without any of the risk of ownership, which I didn't mind at the time. I thought that was smart. So that was my first exit or taste of an exit. And from there, enjoyed the corporate life under a private equity umbrella for about a year. Absolutely loved the people I worked with. Amazing, amazing experience. But I decided that it wasn't exactly for me. I wanted to continue to be an entrepreneur. So I resigned out of that. And then I started consulting for a few years. I actually took, so at that point, I would say that's sort of the pivotal point in my career where I realized I've been spending way too much time working. It's time for me to reset and play. So this was 2014. So a decade later, I took all of 2014 off. Just took it off. I call it a sabbatical. I did try a couple of startups during that time, but they miserably failed. So I just call it my sabbatical year. So I invested in an app that was supposed to help families get together and do a bunch of fun things, like a bunch of coupons, fun things to do. That I didn't get any traction because I spent all my money on building the app and nothing on marketing. And so I learned a lesson there. And you would think after a decade in digital, I would have learned all of this by now, but I'm constantly learning. Every failure is an education happening in real time. So that year I ended up spending a ton of time with my family. We went on hikes, we traveled, we just had a lot of fun, just spent a lot of time. And I know I'm way beyond my 5 minutes. So the condensed version from there is I started consulting in 2015. I ended up taking another sabbatical in 2016 to 2017 to go volunteer teach digital business at a college out in Hawaii. And then from there, I partnered up with a couple of really, really good buddies who had hired me as a consultant and started a few info product businesses with them and scaled that to 192 employees. And that took me to last year, 2019. Toward the end of 2019, I decided to resign out of that and launch what I'm doing now, which is Grunt Workers, which is we partner with companies all over the nation to provide staffing for them, sort of as a white label HR service for for amazing Philippine talent. So talent from the Philippines working on digital campaigns of all types, organic, paid, and more for companies here in the U.S. So it's a full-time staffing firm, and that's a lot of fun. That's what I'm doing now.
That's exciting. And I really appreciate you being able to share the journey and the ups and downs and being able to kind of get where we're at right now, because a lot of the when it comes to entrepreneurship, like you modeled it perfectly, or you mentioned it, perfectly that. It's all decision based. It's all, how do I want to live my lifestyle, and having that ownership towards it. And, when you were mentioning working 16, 18-hour days, that can be all too common, and we can fall into that trap. So what are some of the techniques or some of the strategies that you used to get out of the weeds of the business to be more of an owner instead of an operator?
Sure. Well, it had to be intentional. Once I realized that time truly is finite, we don't have infinite time. It's the ultimate in cost and resource. It's the ultimate gift to give to other people. With my kids, my kids really opened my eyes to that. As soon as I took that sabbatical, we had another kid about a year later. She's 8 now, so I guess I guess she was 1. So never mind. We didn't have another kid after that. This was a year before my realization. She was 1, and I realized, holy cow, I've practically missed all of my kids' first steps. I've practically missed their first words, and I wanted to be there for that. And I didn't want to miss their firsts anymore in the future, because that really hit home for me. So I intentionally decided to, while I was with that private equity company, I intentionally decided to stop my day at 4 o'clock. But I would start at like 5 or 6. So I was still working a long day, but when 4 p.m. came around, the phone turned off, the computer turned off, the laptop shut down, and I focused on my kids and my family until everyone was asleep. And then sometimes I'd open up the laptop just to crank a few emails out. So I still had this addiction to work, but I was intentionally setting aside time and not worried about emergencies. If emergencies happen, it seems like they tend to work themselves out without you, surprisingly. So I learned that, and that's one of my tools, is making sure I block time off for them. Make sure that another key intention that I had was, and a realization that I had was, work interrupts family life, but family never, ever interrupts work life. And that was a mantra that I decided to live by, and to try to elevate my life's choices to match that mantra.
No, that's really important. So the first steps, obviously, being intentional with how you focus your hours and your time and your day, but then also reframing, because not only is that important for you to reframe for yourself and how you see family, and not just interruptions, but like things come up, but also how you train your family to think, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm interrupting you from work. And then it's a different perspective, because I've had that as well. It's like, no, you'll never interrupt me. This is more important. Even though, we have all these meetings and all that fun stuff, but it can almost seem, and here, let's play a little devil's advocate, it almost seemed like a luxury to have this type of lifestyle. So what can we do, or what's some of the things that you would suggest for the busy entrepreneur, the owner who is running at all speeds, still has a family, and wants to be able to get to this state?
Sure. It is a luxury, and it is a decision that you have to make. You have to learn to live without a few things, right? It is definitely a mindset shift. It's a luxury financially too, at times, if you have a high spend lifestyle. So I've always been financially fairly conservative. I like to drive old cars. I like to, if I buy a new car, which I have, I'll drive it for the next 10 years, 15 years, just because that's how I am. So not everybody can live that way. You do have to make some conscious life choices to allow for that lifestyle, to make it so that it's not as much a luxury, but it is the lifestyle that you choose. However, on the business side, I really like what Mike, I think it's Mike Mikowitz.
Oh yeah,
Makowitz. He wrote the Profit First book. Yeah. And engineering your business as an entrepreneur, where profit comes first, helps you afford that lifestyle a little bit more. But it also helps you afford and build in the staff and the outsourcing and the partnerships that you have to develop to allow other people to manage the work for you. So it's certainly like a cleansing process. You do have to learn to let go. And that's really hard for a lot of people. I think that's the biggest luxury, is the ability to let go.
Or even just like the decision. So now we're talking about getting out of the technician trap, not being the one that does everything in your business. Or if you're doing, the most common trap I see for founders is being the head salesperson. That's the biggest trap, really. But being able to kind of put the right people, the right things in place, what are some of the things that you would say would be the best things to offload to other teams or to other members in the company first before we start hitting, something as important as coveted as sales?
Yeah, great question. And I like that you used technician trap, since we discussed that before in a earlier call. But yeah, as far as what to outsource first, I'm not an expert by any means, but I do like to not just outsource, but maybe hire new people right away in a few key roles as I'm building a business. So first, it's just you, a solo person, unless you have a business partner or a co-founder, right? So it's maybe you and one other person. I like to try to take stock of my weaknesses. I'm a huge fan of the personality types of profiles, 16 personality types, DISC. One of my favorites is Strengths by Gallup.
Mm-hmm.
All of those, I've taken all of those and I've really studied what am I the strongest at. And then I try to leverage those strengths. Yeah. I take a strengths-based leadership approach. So I say, okay, here's my strengths. This is where I'm weak. Always hire people who are stronger than you in those certain areas. So for me, what I've realized is I really like the CMO role. So, and I don't mind sales, but one of the very first people I hired in Grunt Workers, this current venture, is a salesperson. And in my previous venture for info products, we also hired a sales team almost right away. That was one of the very first people that we hired, is people to do sales. Mm-hmm. And then within months, I brought in, and I traded some equity for this role, but I brought in somebody to be the CEO. Mm-hmm. Because running the business and the business ops, as much as I love that, I love talking about it, I love consulting on it, but it's not something that I enjoy personally myself to actually do. I do like the CMO role. Yeah. So that's my strength, is being the CMO type of a position. So I like doing the lead gen, the content generation, the audience insights, understanding the people extremely well, reaching out to the people, and really facilitating almost like a service-based type of a role, because that's one of my biggest strengths, is being a service-oriented person. So that's sort of why I like the CMO side, because I can constantly survey people. I can constantly understand how to best serve them, how to best position the products, and to better people's lives when they do purchase from us, whatever I'm selling. It doesn't matter if it's staffing or if it's info products or if it's whatever. But yeah, those are the first two roles that I have sourced regularly over the last decade, I would say, are the executive level roles, but very first are sales, like you said. Get out of sales, let somebody else that's way good at sales take that over.
That's really important, because it starts with you as the leader. It's more of an introspective, what am I actually good at, and actually being okay with letting go, which is not as easy as it sounds, especially because if it's your company, or especially because you're the best salesperson in your organization. I know that those two are difficult things. I like that you were able to also think of this as a real business, not just like an income stream when it comes to, I'm giving away equity to a CEO or operations person to run the day-to-day. And that's an important decision to be able to make. And obviously depends on the business that you, like for our listeners, the business that you have, the business that you're growing, your goals, the way that it's structured. It's not always the one option to do is give away equity, but I think it's really smart to be able to look at your business as a machine and being able to see what are the people that are better than me in these areas that I can plug in, and how can they do a better job with me, and what's the best way to fairly compensate them for the amount of work that they're doing. Right. So it's just being able to look at it from the top down, because when it comes to running a business, I see business more as a machine. It's like a simple system. But within the system, there are organic matter, which is humans, which are not machines, and the marketplace, which is definitely not a machine. So we run into issues when we treat humans or markets like machines. No, they're not. The business is a machine. It can run like a machine, but humans in the marketplace are not machines, which is important to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. I see capital allocation as one of the biggest and most beneficial roles of an executive. And with capital allocation, it's not just money, but you have other tools like equity. So if you are a startup and you know that you have a friend that you've known for 10 plus years who's an amazing executive and you really want him on the team, sometimes you want to make that investment in them. And that's a capital allocation in a way. It's a different kind of capital, but it is a capital allocation to them that they get the proceeds and they get to participate with you in the future winnings of the company.
That is true. And it even goes back to what you mentioned earlier when like driving older cars, and like I have the same mindset to be able to, if you get a new car, you're driving it to like it no longer drives, but
yes, pretty much.
but that comes back to like being a good administrator, like you mentioned, administrator of capital, of finance, of wealth, or whatever you're doing, just making sure that you're running things properly for an end goal in mind. So let's walk through the process then. So we've identified our strengths and our weaknesses. We identified what teams or people or freelancers or service providers that we need to bring on. What's the next stage really to have to be able to work, let's say 4 to 6 hours a day as a CEO and as an owner?
Sure. So sort of what we've covered is exactly what you mentioned before, is that technician trap, which is where you're doing a lot of things yourself and you lose sight of the strategy. So you hire people to do those things for you so you can focus more on strategy. That's one thing that we see a lot of people fall into, is that technician trap. They're in the technical details. So to elevate themselves out, there are usually a few other problems that we've seen entrepreneurs or other managers face as they're growing into their next role. In fact, I always like to say that it's a couple different sets of Legos. The technician trap means you're focused on the tasks, and that set of Legos is the task set of Legos. But when you move into management, and this is exceptionally hard for people to realize and to do, it's a whole brand new set of Legos about being responsible for a team. This is the team Lego set versus the task Lego set.
Yep.
They look similar,
but it's
and
completely
it can be really
different.
hard. Yeah, because when you're responsible for a task, it's very, very different than when you're responsible for another human being. Because like you said, tasks can be machinated as far as automated, controlled. You're in control as the human over that task. But it's really exceptionally hard to control another human, and you really don't want to, because you want them to leverage their strengths and you want them to grow and be better than you, because that's why you hired them in the first place, was to be better than you at that specific role of managing those tasks for you, right? So yeah, it's a totally different Lego set, and it's very mind-boggling and hard to go through that learning curve. In fact, it's a learning curve that I'm still learning and trying to grow through myself.
I think everyone's still learning. To say
perfect.
that you mastered managing humans, it might be a lie. I think I've talked to a lot of different entrepreneurs, a lot of different founders, different levels. I think we're always learning and evolving when it comes to working with others.
Absolutely. Yes. And with that set of team Legos, you have a few problems that you'll start to see. You have the delegation dilemma, which is that transition. And this is sort of a term that we've coined here at Grunt Workers, besides the technician trap. You have the delegation dilemma, which is, okay, I'm used to managing these tasks. How do I delegate to people? How do I get into this learning curve? And what do I delegate to people? That's the biggest question, is what do I delegate? And that's a hurdle that you'll have to face. And it's different for every business, because it depends, again, on you as a human with your strengths. And it depends on the human you just hired and their strengths. And what do you transfer over to them? And it also depends on this pile of Legos you have here that are the task-centered Legos. Yeah. So which of these Legos, or portion of these Legos, do you shift over to this other human? And so that's the delegation dilemma that people need to work through before they're able to scale truly. Along with that, there's sort of a sub-problem to that we call documentation deficiency here. And that means you have this tasks, all these Legos, they're unassembled, but you don't have documentation that shows people how to piece the Legos together to make something incredible. All you have is a bunch of Legos, and you might say, okay, build this. You just handed them a pile of rubble.
And they don't know what to do.
Yeah, they don't have the exact same vision you do, so you can't really get disappointed in them for building something that they think is incredibly cool, but it didn't match your vision because you didn't give them the documentation, the instruction manual to build the exact same thing that you've been building out of this same bunch of Legos that you keep pulling from and building the same thing again and again and again.
True.
Right? So that's the documentation deficiency. So you do need to make sure not only do you need to know what to delegate, but you also need to be able to show them how
To take
to
action on it.
do exactly what you're delegating. So that way they build something consistently for you. And that's a classic. There's books on documentation deficiency out there. One of the best ones is slipping my mind right now. Oh, the E-Myth. E-Myth is the entrepreneur myth.
Yes.
And it's like, it basically says scaling is sort of like a unicorn. It's imaginary, and it's a myth because all you need, one of the biggest key missing pieces, is documentation. So
and the
we call
second
it
to that book would
documentation.
be Productive Profits, but we'll put that on the side. But
Yes.
I really want
Yes.
to highlight what you just mentioned, because I like your analogy of Legos and tasks and being able to manage people. So even when I talk to like private clients and I tell them the two key things to be able to manage people correctly, and this is obviously a work in progress, something that you implement through different measuring systems, but it's accountability, transparency, and ownership. Those two things. So, I mean, for our audience listeners, if you don't have that, you will lose money. Guaranteed. Every single month, you are going to drop money down the trash can, simply because you don't know what someone's doing and no one has ownership over that action item or that outcome. If that happens, I mean, I've seen companies burn cash that way. So when it comes to the management piece, those are the two key, I think, cornerstones to set up in order to not just to, like you mentioned, micromanage a human, but be able to make sure, okay, cool, you're doing this task, and this is how we're going to measure, and who's takes ownership of each each point that matters. The delegation piece, I think that's also, you mentioned it earlier, to have the introspection of knowing like what fits whose skill sets and being able to administer that properly, which does take a lot of insight, patience, as well as just talking to the people that in your staff or just talking to the service providers to be able to make the best decisions. And even being okay with, even if you're 70 to 80% firm or positive in an action, maybe you're not 100% sure, but at least you're taking action towards the right direction and you can adjust as you move forward. And with the document deficiency, I love that term. It's something that I focus a lot in the book Productive Profits, but it's how do you implant your brain into a one-page document? We call it the one-page SOP, and being able to train everyone on your team across multiple time zones with one medium. And I built that out of need. Like that wasn't like, oh, it was just a theory. This was out of necessity. So I love that you're able to condense those 4 steps. So tasks, management, delegation, documentation, which leads to efficient scale, or quote unquote scale or growth for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the accountability piece, if you don't have any documentation with checklists, I love using checklists for everything. If you have checklists, you can always ask the people that you're delegating to say, hey, can you show me that checklist on what you did here? And they can produce that and say, okay, these are the pieces I did. And you can say, okay, great. That's awesome. This is looking great. But if you don't have that, then you fall into, it's almost just like the technician trap, but we call it the it's working illusion.
That's a good one.
It's working. They're doing fine. The people you've delegated to are doing fine, or your business is doing fine. But it's an illusion, because if you start to tip over, or if you're stuck in the technician trap, or in the delegation dilemma, or you're stuck with documentation deficiency, any of those problems will contribute to the it's working illusion. When you get pressure either from markets or the economy, or you haven't been able to pivot because you've been busy in the business instead of on the business, which is a classic adage that I absolutely love. When you're making that transition, you sort of move from working in the business to working on the business. And that it's working illusion means it's working fine. It could even be working great, but any external pressure, loss of sales or increase of sales, can break the system. It means that you've had this illusion because you haven't delegated, you haven't documented efficiently, you haven't itemized out those checklists. So everybody's sort of flying by the seat of their pants, which I think humans do naturally anyways. We're
pretty good at that.
Next step is going to be.
Yeah.
But if we have checklists from previous experiences, sure as heck helps a lot with developing something similar to the successes that you've had in the past.
And I like that, we talked about earlier that it might be a luxury to have a lifestyle that you choose. And it depends again what your priorities are in life. I know here our common shared priorities, making sure that our families, that we're there. We're not just like some 16 hours we're gone. They don't know about us, like where they at. And then we appear like at 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. But with those priorities set, it's no longer really a luxury. It's still a hustle. Like you have to make sure that you do the introspection. What are you about? What are your weaknesses? What should you hire? Looking at what are the action items that are necessary within each area of the business and being able to break that down. From there, how do I manage that appropriately? What KPIs, what documents do I need to set up? Who do I need to hire? Who do I need to bring on? And then being able to say, what do they need to do their job? And then that's how you are able to get to, I guess, the quote unquote luxury of having a family now lifestyle. But it's attainable. It's not just a luxury for the few, it's attainable for those who work for it. And it's not easy, but you have to have the intentions, like you mentioned early on, to get there.
Absolutely. Yes, it's all intentional. It's really, really hard to rewire your brain that work interrupts family life versus family interrupting work life. And it's exceptionally hard. It's something that I'm still working on. I haven't mastered it. I don't know anybody who has, because I'll still get pulled away for emergencies, but it's something I'm working toward. And it's noticeable in my family. For me, my story is this. With the first two kids, they knew that I worked all the time and was hardly ever there. So I've had to work over the last 7 years to really help them understand that I want to be involved in their lives. So it's taken them a while to open the doors to their lives. But my youngest one, because I made this decision while she was young, she always comes to me when she needs things. She's not afraid to ask questions. She'll knock on the door anytime to ask a question, even if I'm on a call, and I'll pause the call to take her question for her. So she has a totally different dad in her mind, in her world view. Her dad is somebody she can rely on as always being there for anything she ever needs. But my other two is still like pulling teeth to say, guys, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Use it. Your younger sibling is using it all the time. You guys can too. I just want to make sure you know that. So it's a very cool transformation to see. Of course, part of that's the kids all have different personalities. So, but I like to think that because I've been there and I've taken a couple of years off, which is a luxury for sure. It's a huge luxury to be with them, that they know that they can rely on me in their worldview. This person that's sort of the center of their universe is the home.
Yeah.
And the people inside that home are their universe. That's their lives to a kid. And when I realized that, it really made a lot of sense to me.
No, and that's beautiful, and I do appreciate it. And I know the humility. We're not all perfect. We're not all masters, and I think that's the cool thing about here is just being authentic and sharing. Like these are the things that we've struggled with. These are the things that we're learning, and here's what I've learned along the way. So I think it's impactful. But James, for our listeners out there, what's the best place for listeners to go to thank you for this episode, contact you, and learn more about you? Sure.
I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. So that URL is linkedin.com/in/James C. Zolman, Z as in zebra, OLMAN. You can also email me, james.zolman@gruntworkers.com. And I'm open to both. I would love to hear from your listeners, and let's meet up again sometime, Raul. That'd be great.
Absolutely, James. We'll put those links in the show notes as well. James, thank you so much for being on, man.
Thank you.